Hello and welcome to Stay on Target, GamesRadar's weekly look at the Star Wars universe. This is episode 1, but unlike the other episode 1, this has no Jar Jar Binks because we're going to look more in depth at Star Wars The Force Awakens to look at what we actually know so far. With me today I have Chris Thurston of PC Gamer, I have Jordan Farley of SFX Magazine, and I am Richard Edwards, the editor of SFX Magazine. Now, we've seen the Star Wars trailer, the new one that came out of Celebration the other week, but do we actually know that much about the movie yet? Now, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? J.J. Abrams continues to keep his cards close to his chest, so I think the best way to start, probably just think about what characters we've got. So, they've announced that the 3 main characters are Rey,
Finn, and
Poe Dameron. Now, Finn is the guy who we saw in the very first teaser trailer before Christmas, who was dressed as a stormtrooper, played by Daniel Boyega. Now, what do we know about him so far?
Well, yeah, we know he's a stormtrooper. He's definitely a stormtrooper. He hasn't just nicked someone's suit and he's running around in it. He is definitely someone who has abandoned the Empire, or
no longer the Empire.
The First Order, yeah, as it's now known.
He's not first.
No, they're not. But maybe they're the First Order. But the second Empire, I don't know. I mean, maybe this will all be revealed.
Yeah, and we know he's on the run. At some point he escapes what appears to be a Star Destroyer, if we're going to go off that second trailer.
Yeah, well, it looked like he was there was someone in a TIE fighter, wasn't there? He was sort of firing on his own troops.
Yeah, making a quick getaway.
Yeah.
And he ends up on Jakku, which is this desert planet, which we all assume was Tatooine at first, but it definitely isn't. It's a new planet. And he's still on the run there, and that's where he meets Daisy Ridley's Rey. Now, the interesting thing
that wasn't actually in any of the trailers, but we've seen in some of the photos of Finn, is that when he's out of his stormtrooper garb, he's got a lightsaber on. He's got a lightsaber quick to his belt. So, could he be a sort of innocent Jedi? Do you think he's got the Force?
I mean, I don't know how they would make that manifest within, the character of a guy who's previously a stormtrooper, unless they kind of expand what it means to be a stormtrooper to also kind of a Jedi, maybe. I don't really know how that fits into his origin, particularly if it fits into his...
It could, of course, it could just be that he's found a lightsaber.
Yeah, it could be. Or maybe the Force is awakening within him, and he didn't know that it was there
and
at first.
So a lightsaber,
yeah,
why not?
Exactly.
Well, of course, and there is that moment in the trailer, of course, where we hear Luke Skywalker saying, the Force is strong in my family, my sister has it, I have it, my father had it. I mean, maybe he's related to Luke somehow.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that either Finn or Rey are going to be the spawn of a Skywalker.
Now, Rey, who's the Daisy Ridley character, we know that she's a scavenger on this desert planet Jakku. So, how do we think she fits in? I mean, could she be a Skywalker? Could she be related to Han Solo?
The way they've presented her definitely riffs on the way that Skywalker kids are traditionally presented. If you think about every young Skywalker, like Anakin, Luke, that you see kind of in the previous films, they begin wearing, khaki on a desert planet. Like or linen. That is the kind of defining image of Skywalker is someone bored in a desert, pretty much. And they've kind of riffed on that a bit with her. She resembles Natalie Portman and Daisy Ridley facially in some ways. They have this, they look like they could be family at least. So there's a lineage from Amidala down to her. I think she's the most likely of the two to be Skywalker, just in the way she's been presented so far. The question is, why, given that if her parents are either Luke or Leia and Han, why has she grown up alone in a scrapyard on a desert planet near, presumably, the Falcon?
Well, that's the thing. We do think that the Millennium Falcon is there in some capacity. We know that it flies past Jakku, whether it starts the movie there, is it? So, I mean, maybe she's being hidden there or something in the tradition of Skywalker kids.
Yeah, in a desert.
Yeah.
Or an Alderaan.
Yeah.
The alternative.
Now, I mean, it's Jakku. It's quite interesting because since the trailer, we've learnt a little bit more about it because the Star Wars Battlefront, we know there's this battle of Jakku between the Empire and the New Republic, the rebels who've become the New Republic, and it's this sort of ship's graveyard. So presumably we're going to see a lot of sort of hints of something that's gone before in there.
Yeah, well, of course, in that now iconic shot, we see that down Star Destroyer with the X-wing in front of it, and it's just it's a beautiful moment because it hints at this incredible battle that we haven't seen and we knew nothing about before this point. But the moment you see it, you can immediately picture this battle in your head, this amazing fight in the skies, and that's gonna happen in Battlefront, right?
Yeah, in Battlefront's DLC at least, it will. Yeah. So the plan is that I think day and date with the release of Battlefront, which is the team multiplayer shooter coming out later this year, there'll be a map that will depict the Battle of Jakku, and the game's developers have said that it's both canon and non-canon, and the best way to
That's convenient.
I think interpret that is the battle having taken place is canon. The events of the game, because it's a multiplayer thing, it's dynamic, aren't, as in there probably weren't loads of stormtroopers respawning in the same airing cupboard and running out again time and time again in that fight.
Yeah, I'm guessing you can play as like Darth Vader and Boba Fett and things.
Yeah, there's a problem with playing as Vader and Boba Fett in that scenario.
Well, yes, but if they've kept the old thing from the expanded universe, he got his way out the Sarlacc pretty easily because he's Boba Fett.
Darth Vader was set on fire by his son.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing they've said about it is that our battle takes place a year after Return of the Jedi. So that suggests that one thing they're adding to the story is that there were further substantial encounters between the Rebels and the Empire after the destruction of the second Death Star, whereas previously, the number of like around the galaxy celebration scenes eventually spliced into Return of the Jedi suggests that
it's
all over. Like the moment the Death Star explodes, everyone in the universe knows about it, and I don't know, local governments collapse immediately. But they maybe are not retconning that, but kind of expanding it a bit. So that fight lasted a lot longer.
Now, Poe Dameron, who's the other member of this triumvirate, is played by Oscar Isaac, and we know that he's an X-wing pilot, and he's sent out by a princess, and at some point he is going to meet
Finn and
Rey. So presumably, are we looking at a Han Solo type dynamic here, or could he be force sensitive?
It seems quite likely that he's going to be the Han Solo of this new triumvirate. He's the best frigging pilot in the galaxy by his own admission.
Yeah, so he might not be, and he might just be exaggerating. I mean, that's quite Han Solo-ish.
He could be. Yeah, he could be the cocky type, which again is in line with Han Solo.
See, I quite like the idea that he's the Leia, on the grounds that the other two are kind of outlaws or kind of from the fringe. And obviously, Finn comes from the Empire, but every shot we see him as an acting character in the film, he's on the run, which is I think far more within the I think basically Daisy Ridley is Han, Finn is Luke, and Poe Dameron is Leia because he's the one from the government.
He's like the authority figure.
He's the one that's come from a kind of a structured background. If you see him kind of like whooping and hollering, and maybe there's some cockiness there. But like, if they are recreating that classic triumvirate in a different form, I think it would be interesting to make.
But hang on, isn't Leia?
Well, yes, she's in the film, but like analogous to, of the new three, right?
Yeah, because I mean, obviously Luke, Han and Leia, we have no idea how they fit into this, aside from the fact that Han and Chewie arrive on the Millennium Falcon and are home.
Presumably Luke has some kind of campfire.
Yeah.
And is still best mates with R2.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's going to be the interesting thing. What have they been doing for 30 years? I mean, I guess we're going to see a lot of comics in the meantime that might explain a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big mystery, isn't it? Because it's been interesting that so far, both of the trailers have focused quite closely on these three new characters at the expense of the original trilogy characters. They're deliberately keeping their plot lines and where they've been for the last 30 years shrouded in secrecy, and that's
Well, there was talk, wasn't there? I mean, that the original draft of the script that Michael Arndt wrote had a lot less of the original characters. I think J.J. Abrams was very keen to sort of up their role so they weren't just cameos. So
presumably they couldn't guarantee how much those actors would participate until the deals were made, at least. Mark Hamill said at Celebration that he wasn't necessarily going to do it, and then it sort of became clear that he had to, or the Star Wars fandom would hunt him down.
Because just the interesting thing as well, not just what's been happening to them specifically, but what's been happening to the universe. Because now we know that we've had the Empire, and that's kind of fallen in some capacity, and that we've had the Rebel Alliance that's become the New Republic. But there's something else that's happened in between, because we know that the Battle of Jakku is between the New Republic and the Empire, and so something has happened in between. So presumably the New Republic really didn't work and got their asses kicked by this sort of new, what is presumably an offshoot of the Empire, this First Order.
It's interesting because it feels like the fact that they have shown all the original trilogy characters in quite separate situations from one another. Obviously, presumably they'll meet each other in in the film, but you see Han and Chewie on the Falcon, you see Luke in a desert somewhere, and it suggests Leia in some kind of ship or indoor environment. That kind of plays against what previously people did with the post-Return of the Jedi Star Wars stuff, which was always to kind of go like, right, Empire's done now, everybody settles down, has families, and starts Jedi Academies.
Yeah.
And so it feels a lot less stable in that way, like, you know, whatever's happened subsequently hasn't just stabilized the good guys as the dominant force in the universe.
Yeah.
But I have no idea, because that's so unprecedented in Star Wars generally, that I have no idea where they go with that from there.
Well, I think that was one of the whatever you feel about the prequels, the interesting idea was not that the Empire took over the Republic, it was that the Republic became the Empire. So presumably there's going to be something here where someone else sort of seizes all these stormtroopers and sees a new opportunity, and you know,
there's a lot of British character actors out of work in there.
I mean, and a Resistance sounds weaker than a Rebel Alliance, really. I mean, a Resistance really sounds like it's just a few guys fighting the system.
Upstart. Yeah, because there's a lot of troops and forces that have without a commander after the end of Jedi. There's a lot of people who are there to be commanded and just sat around doing nothing. Someone's going to take hold of them and take charge of them at some point.
And it looks like there's some Sith stuff going on as well, because Kylo Ren, who we think is played by Adam Driver, who's this guy with the sort of cool sort of Cylon-ish suit and this sort of triple-bladed lightsaber, he looks like he must have something to do with the Force, but at the same time he looks a little bit amateur. So it'd be interesting to see how he fits in.
Yeah, well, I think the interesting thing is, I mean, the end of Jedi, it clearly draws a line on the Sith. Like, after the end of the Jedi, there are no more Sith in the galaxy. I think that's the big victory at the end of Jedi. There's no more bad Force folk. And then they come back with Kylo Ren, it seems. He seems like the first one who's come back. Maybe he's the one who's awakening. That's where the Force has awakened. The interesting thing about him is that he doesn't appear to have a master that we can tell. Or maybe he does.
Unless, there is that guy at the what looks like a First Order rally. I mean, I'm not judging because he's wearing sort of black suit, but that is normally the Sith garb.
There is also the voiceover for the first trailer, which is a sort of very kind of, you know, it's Andy Serkis.
Andy Serkis' character,
and it's a very kind of like, you know, it's a Sithish voice in terms of its kind of, it sounds a bit like the Emperor. And, you know, this is complete speculation, but I think if they were going to do a kind of, the traditional thing that's always happened post-Return of the Jedi in Star Wars is some kind of Emperor ghost, Emperor clone, Sidious kind of presence in some other way. And if they were going to do any kind of ancient Sith Lord or even the Emperor, I think Andy Serkis is the guy they would get to do that, because that's just, that sort of screams the kind of thing that he would be hired to do is, you know, look really old and
also the useful thing of that is, like, if you look at Ian McDiarmid, who was about 40 when he played the Emperor, but now he's still around to play the Emperor as an older version of himself. So you know, you got to think ahead, because I mean, presumably Disney are going to be making these for the next 50 years. So
I think the one big clue that he could be the first of this new order of Sith is his lightsaber, because it appears that it's just been thrown together. Like, it doesn't have the elegance that you would expect from a lightsaber from someone who's been trained to build a lightsaber. I mean, they had a model at Star Wars Celebration, and like the casing for the actual saber looks like it's been like stuck together with tape and blue tack. Like, there's wires hanging out of it, and it doesn't look like there's any kind of craftsmanship that's gone into it.
Does it look like makeshift, or does it look really old? Because that would be the two possibilities.
Yeah, I think it looks a bit makeshift from my perspective. And like the plasma that comes out of it, it doesn't look like the elegant plasma that you'd expect from a lightsaber. It looks aggressive, it looks brutal, it looks like someone's kind of put this together and made it with anger and passion, rather than technique.
So that's basically what we know about the plot of Episode 7, The Force Awakens, so far. We'll be back next Monday with Episode 2, Attack of the Moans, or whatever title we can come up with, where we'll be talking about a different aspect of the Star Wars universe. But in the meantime, have a great Star Wars Day, because today, of course, is May the 4th, and in traditional Star Wars style, may the Force be with you.
That was a pretty sweet video, right? If you want to see more, go to GamesRadar's YouTube page over here. Or if you want to read, maybe up your game a little bit, go to GamesRadar.com.